So the way I see you, you're facing kind of your screen is not in front of you, but I guess that's the
No,
way.
I'll face this way.
Wait, you've done it before. You know what you're doing. Okay.
Yeah. Now we are live, so I was going to be playing some of your music,
Wow.
and I'm even going to share the screen with people.
What is this from?
This
Oh.
is from the Zipper Hall.
Oh, cool. Well, that's a concert with Roger Kellaway, the trio uh, segment, right?
Yeah, with Derek and Peter.
Yeah. What is this thing called love, more or less?
It's beautiful.
Beautifully recorded by my buddy Jason Johnson.
Oh, yeah, right. I saw him.
He was so sweet. He just was support system for me at that moment. Uh,
All right.
well,
I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to stop.
that was more than enough.
That was really beautiful. I was there.
I remember.
Yeah.
And you were there 2 years later.
Yeah. And that was an amazing concert.
Yeah, and there's audio and video. In fact, I should probably take this moment to say that in lieu of the Pianospheres jazz concerts, of which there were to be three this summer, they're going to stream the concert I did for them in July of last year, and I think they're working on it. They have they have 3-camera video that they're going to edit together,
Yeah.
and I think they'll do it in 2 segments because it was like a 2-hour concert. And so that should be in July sometime.
That was an amazing concert, and it was absolutely packed with all kinds of impressive people. It was great.
I was impressed.
I know. I remember when you looked out and you said, "Wow, thank you for coming." And you mentioned names, and you were kind of blown out, right?
I was. I didn't know what to expect. This was really, with all of the things I've done in my life, including, quite a bit of playing live, even though most of my life has been in a recording studio. I had never played in a concert arena under my own name. I mean, actually, the thing that you just played with Roger was like a baptism, and I'm so grateful that he engaged me to play for his 2-piano event, and I had a chance to play the song that you just heard with Peter and Derek, and then a solo number, and then all the stuff we did together. So when Pianospheres contacted me about inaugurating a jazz opportunity for them, because they're mostly devoted to contemporary classical music and have been for 25 years. I'm always shy. I'm always a little reticent about, oh, can I do this or should I do this? And I thought I should do this. And thank God for Roger and for the preceding opportunity. But when I walked out, having played Catalina's gigs with trios and stuff, this just felt more formal and more like it felt like I had less clothes on, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it was definitely, Zipper Hall is a really beautiful hall and a beautiful stage. The sound is excellent. And yeah, it was definitely, it was all about you. It was really beautiful.
Well, I have a kind of a funny moment to share with you all. So I had decided, because of the nature of this being a Pianospheres concert and the fact that so many people coming would be people who were an audience of very edgy contemporary music, that I would open with a piano solo that would be spontaneous and would be using some of that language,
Yeah.
That much I had committed to. So I'm backstage, excuse me, waiting to go on and not knowing kind of how it's going to go down. And so I didn't sense that anything was going down. And I asked the stagehand, I said, do you know who's going to announce me? And he says, nobody's going to announce you. This is a classical concert. And I thought, when you go to the Philharmonic, no one says, well, let's hear it for Esa-Pekka Solomon. And it doesn't go that way, right?
Right.
And I said, so how do I know what to do? He said, I'll tell you and you'll go out. So he said, okay. So then I walked out, and all of a sudden it just hit me, the formality of what I was doing and what was about to happen. And I was sort of in a frozen state mentally. And when I walked out, there was all this applause, and I looked out and I saw these people that I've known so many of all my life. It's like This Is Your Life emerging, and it really, it was the beginning of being put at ease, and I remained at ease for the 2 hours, and it was a very magical night for me.
It was a great night. Yeah. I was so happy about it because you and I have been friends for so long, and I knew how much it meant to you. I could see, and it was a great evening.
Well, you were one of many who were dear friends of mine who did show up, and I felt like it was a party, except
Yeah.
I was playing my own party instead of having somebody else play.
That's it's an interesting point that you bring up. I was always kind of amazed at your you said it, so I'll say this word: shyness. Your basic shyness. Like you were always extremely humble. You always, when I would ask you to play live gigs or sit in or something, you would always say, "Well, okay, I'm not sure how it will go," and and it was always great. But I was always amazed at that because I know that your reputation in the studio was so incredible, you know. Um, and so anyway, that always impressed me over the years. It was like, wow, he's so,
Thank you.
yeah, he's so humble. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad that you're here the day after Blackout Tuesday. I'm glad we did that. And I was supposed to have Terrence Love from Steamers on yesterday, but we decided that we would we would black out. And anyway, so today we're back on track with Mike Lang, who is a guy who grew up here, and we'll get into that a little bit, but grew up here and got into the studio world and was a person who was noted for being able to make music right away with something that was given to him, which is not a super common trait. You know, put some music in front of somebody, and then the first time they play it, it's music. You know, not just like. Ugh. So I know that was your reputation. So I remember, I remember the story of how you got into your house and whose house it was before, which was a great story. But how um, how how did you come up? Were your parents musical? I can't remember.
Um, excuse me. Um, I grew up in a show business family. My father had started out as an agent. He came from Brooklyn with a law degree out to LA and really didn't know anybody. He was a very ambitious guy. I'm not sure if he knew exactly what he was going to do, but he ended up working for several agencies and eventually was agents for really huge movie stars. And that was the beginning of his career. And he was eventually associated with MCA, working under Jules Stein and Lou Wasserman.
Oh,
And then when MCA acquired the Republic lot, uh, and they started this television company called Review Productions, my father went with that part of the company and eventually then it became Universal. Uh,
oh,
and he became a vice president, executive vice president for them. He originally started by running the television department, and then he left that to be an in-house executive producer of motion pictures. And that's basically what he did for the last years of
wow.
his life. And he was very good at it, had an amazing career. He's a very larger than life, intimidating guy. And my relationship with him was very complex. Um, but I look back on it, you know, one thing I've learned is when you get some distance from the relationships you grow up with, you just kind of come to a balance of what it is, you know. And now that I'm a father and a grandfather, I'm a much more forgiving, son of what was good or what wasn't good. So anyway, that was one side of it. My mother died when I was very young, and my father remarried, and his wife for most of his life was a singer named Monica Lewis, who had a fairly notable career. She went on the road with Benny Goodman when she was 16
Oh,
and recorded her first husband. It was a very short marriage that was annulled, but she was married to Bob Thiel, who produced John Coltrane and a lot of jazz records, a very notable jazz producer.
huh.
And in fact, he and I had a joke because after he married my stepmother, he married Jane Harvey, and then he married finally Teresa Brewer. And through some ironic set of circumstances, I told him that I was probably the only musician who had recorded with all of his wives. So he got a kick out of that. So anyway, Monica then came out to LA and was pursuing an acting career and was signed to MGM as a contract actress for a while. And then basically when she met my father and married him and had a son, my brother Rocky, she was doing a lot less of all of that. She always sang and recorded and appeared occasionally, and I actually produced 3 of her recordings, which was a wonderful experience for me.
Oh, wow.
And so that's where I came from. I came from inside rather than outside.
That's it. That's really interesting. I didn't know that information. Kind of remembered that possibly your dad was something like a lawyer, but that he really wasn't a lawyer in his
No,
older
he
age.
never, to my knowledge, he never practiced law.
Yeah.
But he had that kind of mind. Very.
Yeah. Really interesting. So, um, it sounded like you were doing all of this stuff pretty early, right?
Well, I started playing the piano when I was 4.5.
Oh,
And I was actually told that I asked for lessons, which I think was not maybe accurate. I can't imagine any 4-year-old say, "Hey, can I have piano lessons?" I mean,
you might have
it
said,
didn't
"I want
match.
to play piano."
But anyway, I seemed to have an aptitude for it, and eventually, when I had various piano teachers, I was never really anybody who wanted to be a concert pianist. I didn't love practicing so much. But what I did love was I loved playing classical music because I loved the music creatively. And I think my sight reading skills probably accrued from that, because I used to like grab the first book of piano sonatas of Beethoven or Mozart and I play them over and over again and I could get through them and some I would work on them to a certain extent, but that I just loved doing that. It was a big part of what I did, and then I loved to improvise. And eventually, I worked as a student with an amazing teacher who was a composer out here. His name was George Tremblay, and he was a very close associate of Arnold Schoenberg.
Oh,
And he taught a lot of film composers. He had a lot of very notable people. Johnny Mandel studied with him. Randy Newman studied with him. A lot of people like that. Leonard Rosenman. And so my father was looking for somebody that would be an interesting person, and he had heard about this guy George Tremblay. So George Tremblay, he was this crazy guy. He'd come to my parents' house, and I was probably, let's see, 13, 14 years old. He drove a 1941 LaSalle that had the most beautiful, work. Anyway, he show up, first lesson, he said, "Hey kid, what do you know about Bruckner?" So I'm referring to Anton Bruckner, who was a not well-known, particularly composer to the public, but he was a very important composer, was a contemporary of Wagner, and wrote symphonies and choral works and stuff. I never heard of him. I wondered what baseball team he played for. So I said, well, okay, we're going to listen to Bruckner today. And so then the next week he'd show up. He said, what do you know about Shakespeare? Well, I didn't know much about Shakespeare either. And then the third time he showed up, he said, what do you know about Charlie Parker? So, I mean, this was his range of reference, you know? And then the next time he talked to me about Arnold Schoenberg's 12-tone method of composition. And he showed me what it was and had me writing 2-voice canons in 12 tones. So I had weekly lessons with him for about 2.5 years. Everything that I've become, for me, would never have happened without him. The diversity, the depth, the concentration on what's really special and magical about all these different things. Because after that, I went to a prep school in New Jersey for 3 years, and the academic experience was extraordinary, but there wasn't that much music. But I had a jazz band, and we did stuff. And then I went to the University of Michigan for 4 years, and I was very much in the music school there. But nothing actually gave me what George Tremblay gave me.
Wow, that's
so then after that, back in LA, and that's when things started to happen professionally.
Yeah. Is George Tremblay, is he a composer or was he?
He was a composer. He was an amazing composer. He didn't push his music. That wasn't his thing to do.
Yeah.
But a lot of other people did. One of his students was David Raxton, and David was a fearless supporter of Tremblay's music and got it performed at there was a series called Evenings on the Roof that is now called Monday Evening Concerts, and Tremblay was performed through David Raxton, a lot of people being advocates for him. Wow. George was an amazing improviser as a pianist. He could do these Gershwin-esque but atonal kind of improvisations. He could improvise a 4-voice fugue using the language of Bach. Just an outrageously gifted person.
Wow, interesting. Was he American or was he from America or from?
He was from Ottawa, Canada.
Yeah.
I looked that up. He didn't tell me that.
Okay. I just wondered. I wondered if he was Russian or something,
Yeah. No, Tremblay. I think it's a French name.
Yeah.
Is Ottawa part of French Canada? I think it is.
I'm not sure, actually.
Me neither.
That's
We,
good. I feel better
we're
now.
both in the same spot on that one.
Okay. By the way, a few people have joined. I just thought I would tell you. And Jorge Estrada says
Oh,
hello. And
he is such an amazing musician, and I really got to know his music quite recently. There was something on Facebook that I heard, and his sense of harmony and sense of what to do with a song is so special. So I'm honored to have you here, Jorge. Thank you for being here. I hope I
he's,
don't bore you too much.
he's well, I don't think so because he says the legendary Mike Lang, session musician extraordinaire. So I don't
Ouch.
think we're boring him.
Okay. Better put on some mascara. I never put it on, by the way.
Well, you look gorgeous.
You do
And
too.
I'll tell you a few people who I know you know, like Greg Karukas
Who?
and Greg Karukas.
Oh yeah, sure. He's wonderful.
Yep. And let's see. I know Dave Shank and David Moscow and Tim Weston.
Oh wow.
And yeah, Joe Rohr. I don't know if you know George Rohrbacher. Anyway,
Sure.
anyway, a bunch of
Yeah,
people.
well, hello, everybody. Thanks for. Hope we keep you entertained and informed of something, whatever.
um, you know what I want to ask you because you've done so much of a variety in studio work. Did you feel that? Well, you kind of just answered the question and how you came up with George, but did you feel that being a jazz musician helped you in other styles and reading and
Yeah. Well, the short answer is yes. And I'm now thinking about how I what I want to say about that question. Um, that just the whole idea of improvising versus not, it's like there's two sides of a coin. There's people who play music that is written and they're interpretive, and depending on their background, they may bring more or less kind of creative ideas about interpretation and what that means and what the boundaries might be. But in jazz improvising, that opens the door to any style of music improvising. And thinking back, uh, trying to relate to the question, um, the first, I guess this is worth telling. My first piano teacher, her name was Gertrude Floyd. And, in my eyes, being whatever I was, 5, 6, 7 years old, she was this matronly, kind of large lady with white hair. And she came in. And the thing that set everything in motion was that she had me playing the John Thompson book, which many people start with, where you play the first piece with your right hand, the next one's the left hand, then you put them together. So there was that. But she also brought in popular sheet music. And so right off the bat, she had me learning chords. I mean, she didn't really know chord symbols, but she would write out like FACE for F major 7, and I would learn that I could play that with my left hand and play the melody with my right hand, and then I could play, and then automatically you have to think about what you might do personally with it. God knows what I did in those days, but that got me going, and then I remember later on, probably I was about 9, I stumbled on to a piece called Bumble Boogie, which was a pop hit record that a guy named Jack Fina, who was Freddie Martin's pianist, recorded. And it was a pop adaptation of Rimsky-Korsakov's The Flight of the Bumblebee.
oh
So it's and the left hand is
yeah.
well, that was my big showpiece. See, so when my parents would show me off, I would play that. But I was always interested in bluesy type stuff,
Yeah.
and I was exposed to R&B music in the 50s because my parents had black people working for them, and they had all these records. So
Uh-huh.
I was hearing 78 R&B records in the beginning of the 45 thing. And so even though I never played that music literally, it was in my blood. And then when I started working in the studios and I started being asked to do music in that style, there was this connection that made it doable.
Yeah, yeah.
It gave me a path to reunite with it in a wonderful way.
Yeah. You must have also had an attitude um, throughout your career, but definitely probably in the early part of your career, that was like, you know, uh, a can-do attitude, or just like, yeah, I'm going to do this, or moving forward. You couldn't have had too much fear, or at least the kind of fear that held you back, right?
Um, that the answer is complex because I think in order to be creative, I mean, there are some people who are really skill set studio musicians, and I have friends who are pianists who have different personalities and different balances of things. And there are some people who have a way to do something, and it's kind of I won't say frozen, but it's kind of set. It's like this is the way you do this is the way you do that. And I am aware of that process, and I'm connected to it and use it when it's appropriate. But I'm much more about what's happening right now. Where's the energy? Where's the spirit of the music? And that guides me. And even in doing studio work where so much of it doesn't necessarily require it, I'm looking for a place to inject myself and make it personal when it's appropriate. So that takes over the fear part. You're involved in the discovery of it's like you're playing something for the first time. You'll never play it for the first time again. And that's why first takes are so magical so often, especially in records, with songs and jazz records. I'm very attracted to that. But I have been on sessions where I thought, okay, this is the date when everybody figures out how incapable, how mediocre, how limited, how inappropriate my presence is here. It's like all of that goes through my head on occasions. And there have been times I've left a session and I think I'll never work for this person again. And then you start to realize that the odds are kind of better than you think they are. And you deal with that. But I think if you're open to being emotionally related to what you do, you're open to all of it, and you have to accept all of it. So I live with that. And I also live with the fact that there are times when I feel like the music is coming from an unknown place, and I'm a vehicle. It's a vessel that is and it's passing through me, and I just need to let it happen and not be more clever. And I've experienced that, and I believe in that. And that's a real important part of it for me.
Yeah.
I want to be connected to that as much as I possibly can. Meaning I don't know what's going to happen. Even if I'm playing, a piece of music, recording a piece of classical music, that each time I play it, it's not going to be, how do I just take this and literally make it 2% better,
Yes. Curfew tonight, 9:00.
Oh, curfew.
All right. Yeah. We all got that, I'm sure. Yeah.
Stop.
Okay.
Oh, I know how to silence this.
There's a funny.
Power off. Okay, no more alerts.
Now I am
Morgan
going.
Ames is here, by the way. I just saw her
I
message.
know. Are you looking at Facebook comments too? You're looking at the Facebook comments?
No, I just saw she just messaged me and said something like she was connected, and when I tried to silence it.
Yeah,
she was trying to reach me earlier to ask me if I knew how she could connect and what.
Oh,
so it's all good.
I see. She said your stories are, as always, your funniest line. I seem to have an aptitude for it regarding childhood lessons. You think? Oh, and Greg Karukas, he said, "Coffee talk with Mike. First jazz LP influences as a teenager, more session stories."
Oh.
So what first?
By the way, this background is photoshopped to make me look very intellectual.
Yeah, I've been there, ladies and gentlemen, and that's not true.
There's just no room anymore. No room for anything.
Oh my God. Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I know I've seen your records. You have a big record collection. What is all this behind you? It looks like books, music books? Or
yeah, well, you can't see everything that's here, but I mean, just to my right are piles of CDs, and then behind me are mostly books and a lot of music, published music.
Okay, just for your own.
And then there's the inversion. What's more important is the inversion table to my left. That's very important.
I have one of those too. Very important.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
And then to the left of that is all this hi-fi stuff, but I'm embarrassed to say, owning thousands of LPs, which are really valuable and wonderful, my turntable doesn't work. And
Oh,
all my music seems to be related to the computer now. YouTube is my favorite place to be, and because it's live and it's video, and I like that.
yeah, I know it is. It's very alluring. You can see pretty much everything. I looked up Mike Lang today.
Oh, shame on you.
Okay, first jazz LP influences as a teenager.
The first jazz LP influence as a teenager. That's a really good question. I don't know if I can say the first one. I do remember when LP started to happen.
Yeah.
I got a few LPs from my parents, and I can tell you what they were, kind of, and whatever I made of them. One of the first ones was a record on Epic Records, which was, in actuality, it was the Count Basie Orchestra in the late 30s or early 40s. And it was packaged as a Lester Young record, but it really was the Count Basie Orchestra featuring Lester Young on these tracks.
Yeah.
And I love that record. I mean, I don't know if I appreciated Lester Young as much as I grew to appreciate him later, but
Yeah.
the time feel of that rhythm section with Walter Page and Joe Jones and Count Basie and Freddie Green, that was just that. I mean, I couldn't verbalize. All I knew is I love that. And I remember I had an early Dave Brubeck record of piano solos that he did for Columbia, and I think it's the first recording of the Duke. And what's the tune that Miles Davis did? Well, Miles did that one, but there was another one that he did of Brubeck's that In Your Own Sweet Way. I think those were the initial recordings of those songs. And I've never been a major Brubeck person. I mean, I've actually grown to admire him more now, but I just it wasn't my thing. But I thought that record and his piano playing, that it remains a great record for me. And then the next record I'm going to mention to you was huge for me. And it was the first LP that Lenny Tristano did for Atlantic. And that's when he did these recordings where he used bass and drums on some of the tracks and slowed it down to half speed to play the piano track. And then he did a tune called Turkish Mambo that was multi-tracked with a 3/8 track and a 5/8 track and a 7/8 track, all superimposed, doing these kind of ostinatos. And then he played this kind of bluesy kind of solo on top of it. And there were some live recordings at the Half Note with Lee Konitz that were extraordinary. And his music just always, ever since then, it's been a major component of things that I'm attracted to. And there's only a couple of really wonderful mature recordings of his for me. It was that record, and he did a second LP on it, both on Atlantic, and the second one was called The New Tristano, and it's all live piano solos. No,
The new Trisano.
yeah, that was his second album.
What
And
was the first one called?
I think it's called Tristano.
Okay.
And it's got a black cover of him. I'm sure they're around. I'm sure you can find YouTube versions of them. And so very important for me. And then at some point early on, I heard a Miles Davis record from around that time. Now I'm moving forward more to the mid 50s, probably, whatever was going on then. It was certainly before the band, the Coltrane, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So those were major significant jazz recordings.
Yeah. That's really cool. Oh gosh. Okay, I forget what I was going to ask you. Oh well, that happens.
This is live. It's live.
Oh gosh. Lenny Tristano. I mean, usually when I speak to great players, they always mention Lenny Tristano. So it's really, it'd be nice to listen. And also for somebody like me, who's not really a piano player, doing takedowns is really good because I find that I can appreciate, or orally, I can appreciate great music. But when I do takedowns, there's something else that happens to my head. All of a sudden I'm like, oh, I get it because it makes it real for me. It's like a choice that they made, that I probably wouldn't have made, and it's like, wow, cool.
I'm really bad at that stuff because I'm impatient, and sit there and, is that? I'd rather look at a transcription and just kind of breeze through it and spend time with it that way. But everybody that I've talked to who's immersed themselves in transcription, they just say it's the greatest discipline in the world. And then you really do, you learn by doing the transcription as opposed to just looking for somebody else doing it,
Yeah.
So I wish I had the patience to do more of that, maybe.
We'll definitely do go into session stories, but first, Mark Baldrige, who's usually on here as an audience, he said, "Do you improvise when playing classical music? Like Mozart might do."
Do I, you say?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like the first piece I played at my concert was absolutely spontaneously kind of composed improvisation / composition.
Uh-huh.
So if that's what you're talking about, yes. If you're talking about something else, tell me what you're talking about.
Okay. The answer is yes. Let's see. John Prue says hi.
Hi, John. What a great musician he is. I just want to dwell on John Prue. He is great.
He's great.
I wish I could sing. It's not going to happen. It never did. And we're all very lucky that's
Okay. So the classical question just reminded me of a story that I'll tell about you, which is kind of a funny. It's not really about you, but it is. So Tamir and I were playing at Ca del Sol. We were doing a duo. There was nobody in the place that night. Nobody in the place except the bartender and the waiter or something.
Right.
And who should come in? Mike Lang and Frederick
Talgorn.
Talgorn, right. Incredible classical pianist. And
composer, an amazing film composer and classical composer. And he's a very special talent. He's not nearly as well known or recognized as he should be.
Okay. And they had obviously had a taste or two before they got there. And in fact, Mike sat down and actually went to sleep. And Frederick and Tamir sat at the piano improvising classical and jazz. And I was pretty much basically the only audience, and it was mind-blowing. That was such an incredible evening. You don't remember that?
This is amazing here. And I'll tell you a funny story in return, which is so parallel. I don't remember that at all, but I guess you said I came already prepared to be altered. So Frederick Talgorn and I also came to Ca del Sol when Jack Sheldon was playing with Marty Harris there. And Ross Tompkins was there. He wasn't working that night, but he would come and hang out. Yeah. And so we're having a drink and we were going to go have dinner. And Jack comes up to the table and I introduce him. I said, "This is Frederick Talgorn, and this is Jack Sheldon, blah, 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 blah." And he looks at me, he says, "So you want to sit in?" And I always freak out because I always feel like, unlike a guy like Ross Tompkins, who knows every song and could play it in any key at the drop of a hat, I can't remember anything. I mean, it's just not something that I've been immersed in, maybe years ago when I was doing a lot more, rehearsal piano, but that had been long gone. And so immediately I'm thinking he's known for calling obscure tunes and it's just going to be disastrous. So I said, "Jack, thank you so much." I said, "But I just really, would just rather listen to you and, kick back." He says, "You don't want to play with me?" And I said, "No, I love playing with you." But I said, he says, I said, "To be honest with you," I said, "I feel embarrassed because I don't know a lot of songs and you're going to ask for a song and I won't know it." And I said, "I'd rather not embarrass us both, He says, "Do you know Stella by Starlight in B flat?" So I said, "Yes." He said, "Will you play it with me?" And I thought, okay, I can't get out of this. So I go up there and we play Stella by Starlight in B flat. And he sounds great and the rapport is great. I'm thinking, God, this is wonderful to play. I never played a duet with Jack. I've done a lot of other quartet gigs and a lot of recording stuff, but never. And I thought, this is really cool. And so we finish it. He says, "How about blues in F?" Well, okay. I would help with that. So we did that. And then he said, "Can you play My Funny Valentine in E flat or whatever?" And so we did 3 tunes and then it felt good. I was going to be done. And so I got up and started to make it back to the table. And he goes to the mic and he said, let's hear it for the world's greatest piano player, Mike Lang. And not knowing what was about to come after that, I thought, what a sweet thing to say. That's really nice. And right after that, he says, and let's hear it for the world's greatest waitress, Nellie. So it was just a setup for a comic thing. So it normalized me right away.
Well, he was definitely a character. Yeah, but that must have been nice, and I'm sure Ross enjoyed it, and Marty, I'm sure. Marty Harris, when I started that gig, I had to work with Marty Harris, and Marty Harris, somebody said he looks like he's waiting for a bus. He would just kind of tune out, and he would just kind of go on automatic, and then as soon as Ross would come in, which they were pals, right? They
Right.
always
Yeah.
hung out. He would start playing. He would start playing Ross licks. He would get very excited. So he must have been really excited that you were there.
Well, my experience with him is always the same. He's very warm and laid back, and he's kind of a good field piano player, musical.
Yeah,
Kind
he was actually really good. Yeah, when he was really playing, with people he liked to be playing with, he swung his ass off. He was very solid and wonderful.
yeah.
And he was actually extremely loyal friend to people, and I'll always think of him fondly for that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, Bill Marcus, ask him about playing on Freak Out.
Okay, that's easy to answer. I didn't play on Freak Out, but I'll tell you something really ironic, which is there's a tune called It Ain't What You Think, or It Can't Be Enough, or something. There's a track on there, and in the middle, there's a very kind of avant-garde improvised piano solo. And somebody wrote me, because the Frank Zappa record I did play on was Lumpy Gravy. And that was a record that seems to be the most exciting credit I have to many people. And there's a lot of stories about that particular recording project. But so I did some research to try and answer this guy's question. I mean, this all happened in the last 2 weeks, so this is really odd.
Oh,
And I found an interview where Frank Zappa said he played the piano solo on it. So that's what I can tell you, if that's what you were referring to. If you're more interested in asking me about Lumpy Gravy, I can go into that.
go into that.
Huh?
Yeah, go into that.
Okay.
Who doesn't
So
want to hear
I
about
had,
Zappa?
it was like 1967, and I had done about 4 or 5 recording sessions. And I get a call from a guy named Sid Sharp, who was a very, very celebrated concert master contractor, predominantly for pop records. If you needed a string section, he had the reputation for getting the right players to work on rock and roll and pop records and stuff like that. And he had gotten a contracting job with Frank Zappa, who prior to this had done 2 Mothers of Invention records for Verve Records.
Yeah.
And he always wanted to be a serious composer. That was more important to him than anything. All of the pop stuff he did was a vehicle, according to him, that he wanted to have more opportunities to write serious music. So he decided that he wanted to do a solo record, a Frank Zappa record, and he made a deal with Capitol Records to do what became Lumpy Gravy. And so they had done a few recording sessions, and evidently, so I get this call from Sid Sharp, whom I don't know. And he said, "My name is Sid Sharp, and I wondered if you're available for tomorrow night at Capitol Records." And sure, I was available for anything, anywhere, and desperately wanted to be. And I said, "Yeah, I'm available." He says, "Well, this is a very odd thing I'm going to ask you." He said, "But we're doing an album with a young composer named Frank Zappa, and it's very contemporary and it's quite involved. And we had one of Hollywood's most established pianists on last night's session, and he walked off the date and said it was unplayable." And he said, "I've gotten recommendations from Gene DeNovi, who's a wonderful pianist who now lives in Canada, and Roger Kellaway, with whom I did the concert we started with, that you would be the right kind of guy to do something like this," whatever it was, because I had no idea what it was, other than it was hard or what, off-putting.
Yeah.
So all I wanted was to work. And I thought really quickly to myself, well, if it's unplayable and this guy has established that it was unplayable and I reconfirm that, there's nothing negative for me to take home with that. And on the other hand, if I can get it done, then that's, so I have nothing to lose is what I'm thinking. So I said, yeah, I'd love to do it, you know. So got there, and it was like a chamber orchestra with a rhythm section.
Oh, wow.
And the piano music was really clever. And it's like every time the piano would play, it would be in a different style. And, but it was totally within my grasp. There was nothing really, really hard. There were some pentatonic kind of harp type parts, and it said play like Jan Garber, who was a band leader in the 30s. And I had heard of him, so I knew it was supposed to be that. And then you turn the page and it would say Motown 4. Well, I wasn't sure I knew what that was, but it was like that, you know, so I got through it. Nobody had any problems. There was no elaborate conversation about it. I met Frank. There was nothing other than it all went fine. And then it turned out, and there was a photograph that is now on Facebook that David Ocker, who was Frank's copyist in later years, found. That was from the session, and it's Frank at the piano and me at the piano. And so that became like the most popular photo on Facebook. And to this day, if I were to pick the 5 most celebrated credits, that has to be one of them.
Yeah, how interesting.
And then I went on to do some live concerts with him, and those got recorded, and that was their experience. So
that must have been, yeah.
I enjoyed him very much. I liked the music.
Well, on the live gigs with Frank, was that on the live? Sorry, we're breaking up a little. On the live gigs with Frank, was that what size band was it?
The lumpy gravy thing, I think was maybe 30 or 40 people.
Yeah.
And you know, brass and woodwinds and percussion, and like a small.
Was that the live gigs you did with him too? The same group?
Well, later the stuff we did was much later. It was maybe 7 years later.
Oh.
It was a much larger ensemble. It wasn't related to the lumpy gravy at all. It was all more current music, and he had his band there. That's where I met Terry Bozzio for the first time, who was his drummer at the time. He had a great band, and in the orchestra, there were 2 keyboards, as I recall, Ralph Gerson and myself, and we both played piano, acoustic pianos. And then there was a EMU modular system, which was kind of like the original Moog system. It was monophonic. You could only play, you know, melodic things, one line at a time. Yeah. But it had beautiful sounds, and so those are the things that we played. And there was a lot of piano writing, a lot of keyboard writing. It was, you know, we were active.
Yeah, cool.
And it was at Royce Hall, as I recall, and it was great.
Nice. Yeah, not many people I've talked to played with Zappa, although I remember the drummer, I forget his name. This was in the late 70s. He's Vinny Caliuta. So,
I was just going to say, he was a major drummer. That was a major credit for him too.
Yeah, I was friends with him at that time, and yeah, that was an impressive thing, right? Of course.
I love Vinny. He is just a dream to play with. Fabulous musician.
Yeah.
Cool guy.
Yeah. I was living with some really good friends of his, Vita and Doug Lund. Do you remember him, the bass player?
I know the name. I know he plays bass.
Yeah. So anyway, they were real good friends with him too. Let's see who else. Katina DeLuna says hi.
Great. Hi.
And John Prue said, I love Lenny's solo and all the things you are. His articulation is so unpredictable.
Yeah. I'll go with that.
Greg Karukas wants to know, have you heard Brad Meldau's Bach performances?
No, I have not. I've heard a lot of his playing, and I'm a big admirer of him. He's an extraordinary musician, but I have not heard his Bach performances. Yeah. I've heard Keith Jarrett's Bach performances. They're wonderful.
There you go. Yeah, he's not too bad.
Not too bad.
You know what? I heard Keith Jarrett in Japan about 3 years ago, maybe, and with the trio. And I don't know, you can probably tell me listening to him more as a pianist. And I always, it's embarrassing. I always meant to listen to more of his recordings for this particular thing. But what he was doing there was his solos were kind of mind blowing because he was doing his whole solo, entire solo, was motif after motif after motif, connected. They were all connected, like he'd play a motif 3 times, and then from that last one, he would develop a new motif 3 times from that last one. And the whole entire solo was like that all night. And I was so blown away, you know. Does he, do you know, is that his way of soloing?
Well, I'm thinking about it as you talk about it, and to me, it's a great example of what I was trying to talk about that I like in my playing, which is to have it be in the moment. I mean, he's not playing. There are some pianists, who have a rehearsed vocabulary of things that they practice. Oscar Peterson,
Yeah,
great example. He was a very important early influence for
yeah,
me. And one of the things I loved about him was his groove. I mean, it was just so funky and so expressive in the way that I wanted to be at that time. It was all about this. That's
yeah,
all I cared about when I was younger. And Keith he's letting the music identify itself creatively as he's doing it. So yeah, talking about a motive, and that's a very it's kind of uh, a very usable idea when you're trying to make music sound composed, is that you take something and develop it. So that therefore you're not playing something that's pre-designed already. You're going for it. And
yeah,
I think that's the thing I like, was one of the things that I really love about his playing, out of many things that I love about his playing. He's a huge influence on me. I mean, I don't know if it sounds corny to say this, but I find myself very impressionable still. So I'll listen to something tomorrow and I'll be influenced by it, and I just hope that my own being doesn't get compromised too much. Um, it goes through my filter and
yeah,
it ends up.
yeah. That's beautiful. By the way, Dennis Dreeth joined and he said, "Mike, clean your room."
Yeah, you're reading my mind, Dennis. You have no idea. And if you were to see the rest of this house, um, I'm in a new relationship personally, and my girlfriend lives with me, Deborah Pearl, and she's moved all of her stuff from her place here, and this place just looks like a warehouse everywhere. And so we're in transition, and we're dealing with it. And I mean, there's a part of me that would like to have one book, one piano, you know, and maybe some vodka on the rocks. That's all I need. I don't need all this other stuff.
You can make that happen. Morgan Ames said something funny. She said George Duke told me that Frank Zappa made a man out of him.
Wow. Well, I can sort of understand what he means by that. And with George, there's always a twinkle in his eye when he has that kind of thing to say. So God, what a loss to have him gone. And he was a person who really was very interesting, because I mean, he might not have had that Frank Zappa experience, because most of his career was in jazz and R&B music and singing as well as playing. And but he was one of these people who absorbed everywhere he went, and it probably sought out the diversity that he had. And
Yeah.
I resonate with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking to, I was talking, well, I mean, there's so many great conversations I've had. Bob Shepard was a really interesting conversation because he's really, like you, he's played a lot of different things, a lot of studio work, and, also, of course, is a jazz, you know,
Type. He's the
yeah,
type.
and also about being in the moment. Very much, we talked about tone. He's really focused on tone being the bottom line.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that from him.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I adore Bob, and his wonderful wife, who's a great singer. And Bob, but Bob, he goes for it. He just
yeah, he
goes
does.
for it.
He
Really,
does.
it's fantastic.
um, and let's see, what was I going to say? Oh gosh, my brain is. I had a little bit of a difficult morning, so my brain is not quite. And maybe not enough coffee. But you know what I'd like to do? Would you? Are you okay with me playing that that track before? Like it actually started with you doing
I'm
kind of.
sorry, you just locked up, Kathy.
Oh, okay.
I'll wait for you to unlock up.
There we go.
I hear you. Go ahead.
All
Which
right.
track?
The one at Zipper Hall with you. I think it was the same track that I was playing in the beginning, but the intro was you doing, like a rubato kind of.
Oh, yeah, you could play that. There's another track if you want to play it.
Yeah,
If you have it, there's two things I did that would
yeah.
just be. It's Paul McCartney's "Let It Be,"
Okay.
and that if you want to play that, and then if you want, whoops, I just lost the main screen.
No, that's okay. I'm sharing. I'm
Oh,
sharing.
I know what you're doing. Okay. Uh, and then the other thing is that if you want, I can talk to you about how my recording career kind of began, and I can
Yeah,
give you some highlights maybe of what happened in the studios, some of the fun things that happened, and the
absolutely.
stories.
So
Good.
I'm just looking for. I did see.
Here it
Here we
is.
go.
That's it.
Yeah,
So let me say something about this before you play it.
yeah.
So this whole concert was related to Paul McCartney. Roger had written a 30-minute suite for two pianos and rhythm section that was a medley of his songs, but reimagined through Roger's filter. An amazing piece, and it had amazing things for us to do. So when he was telling me about what we would do separately, he said one of the tunes should be a McCartney tune, but it needed to be a McCartney tune that wasn't part of any of the things he had written.
Oh,
And he gave me this list, and I'm looking at it, and I wasn't really. There's like 30 tunes here, and I couldn't find one. And then I saw "Let It Be," and that was it for me. And so I had this idea that I wanted to play the melody as if I were singing it, and I wanted to sing it with the same phrasing and sentiment of Paul McCartney. So in preparing for this, I didn't prepare for it in terms of the improvisation part of it. I prepared for it in terms of I I found the printed music. There's a whole book of Beatles tunes that were printed, and they're very accurate. So the rhythmical notation of the melody was very much like the recording. So I just zeroed in on the lyric and the sentiment of the song and tried to play the melody to be that, to be authentic in that sense. And that was the motivation for whatever I did. There you go.
okay. Now, I'm going to say that I'm going to take this opportunity to go to the ladies' room.
Oh, you beat me
With my
to
ladies'
it.
I'm in a men's room here at my house. Anyway, I'm going to go there, but I am going to be listening. I'm going to leave the door open.
Oh, I see. Oh, that's how you finesse it. I got it. Okay, great. Now, if the track is too long and it wears out its welcome, it's going to be
Okay.
fine. Whatever,
Well,
whatever you think is appropriate.
yeah, we'll live with it for a few
So
minutes.
I can't see the comments, but if anybody says stop that goddamn music, you'll know.
Yeah,
Okay,
I don't think anybody will say that.
great. Thanks.
Okay, here we go. I'm sharing my screen and I'm making it a full screen, which is always preferable. And there is Mike Lang. And this is a solo piece, right?
It is.
Okay, great. Cool. I love it. Here we go.
Make sure you have enough volume, Kathy. I
Yeah.
think you might, but it's kind of on the quiet side.
was just gorgeous.
Thank you. Thanks for playing it. It's nice to revisit it after a distance of time.
Yeah, um, now that I know how you came up with George's direction, it makes sense. It's really listening to how you go through um, these different chapters. It's like here's a chapter, and then that kind of morphs into that chapter, and it's really quite beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
I'm also a really big fan of ending simple, and which you did beautifully. It's like, okay, I have said what I have said. Here it is. It's just so nice.
Well, it's the risk, but the gift of letting things happen and trying not to control them so much. Trying to stay out of the way and just understand it. I'm not a particularly religious person in any specific sense, but I believe in things happening in a way that you can't answer. And I believe there are forces that you can't necessarily quantify and you make friends with those forces. And they're a gift that come to you.
Yeah.
Whatever
Um,
that means.
well, it means exactly what it means. It's really, I think people such as yourself who are successful in any way that they feel that they are successful, they know that, they know that it is a gift and they treasure it, you know, and that's why they're doing it, and that's why they continue to do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, let's see, I have a few questions, and also I want to talk about your studio stuff. I want to talk about Lorraine Feather, your work with Lorraine Feather.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah,
love it.
and I want to talk about some session stories and
Okay, I've got a bunch in my head. I
yeah.
have a few in my head, which is usually not the case.
Oh, cool.
So that's good. But so what do you want to talk about next?
And I do want to say hi, Atmaro. Um,
Tomorrow.
yeah,
What a talent. Oh my God.
I know.
We participated on a very unusual project. There's a guy named Jean-Michel Bernard, who's a pianist composer from France. And he's been over here and he did a wonderful Lalo Schifrin project. And so he put together this thing of 12 pianists. And it was kind of a tribute to Ray Charles, and it's to raise money for medical aid. And we all played Georgia on my mind. It was like everybody played 8 bars. So there were 3 choruses of Georgia. And I
Wow.
was one of the pianists. And it was a great project. And it was, we're all just doing this alone and sending in our 8 bars on an iPhone. And Jean-Michel put it all together. And it's up on Facebook and maybe a couple of other places. And
Oh, I'd like to find that. So somebody might work on finding that, but
yeah,
how
12,
would I
if you
find it?
just put 12, do it on Facebook and do 12 pianists Georgia. And
Oh,
it'll show.
I think I've seen that in passing. Facebook, Georgia, 12 pianists. 12 pianists. Okay, interesting. Um,
And
cool.
there's another one in the works. I can't probably say more than that, but there's another 12
Oh,
pianos
cool.
revisited. I don't know, something coming up.
That's funny because as we were talking, I was remembering that I had originally wanted you on my record Intuition, right? Da, 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 I just happen to have that here, which was the 10 different piano players that I had. Remember, I came over your house
I
and we
do. I
played.
remember putting 6 weeks on hold for you. No,
Somehow it didn't work out, but I was thinking as we were talking, I should do that, the second version, you, and I wanted John Hammond and Tamir, I should do it again.
yeah, those are
Uh,
great projects to do those kind of things. They're great.
yeah. Okay, so let's talk about studio stuff because that's such a big sub area
Okay.
for
Well, before we do that, maybe before I forget, I should tell the Lorraine uh,
sure.
story. So,
Before
I,
you go into the,
yeah, sorry.
I just want to no, it's I just want to give an introduction about Lorraine, just in case people don't actually know her. But Lorraine is an
Yeah, go
incredible
ahead.
songwriter, singer. I mean, she's really an amazing songwriter, and she's written a lot of lyrics to main jazz people's uh, compositions. And her father was Leonard Feather, who was one of the most famous jazz critics ever. Okay, and over to you.
Okay, so I had known Lorraine and was a fan. I wasn't an expert on her music, but I had heard different things. She, prior to what she started doing with doing older music, she did a wonderful kind of very contemporary uh, record. I remember Don Grusin was the pianist on the album, if I'm not mistaken, and it was a really cool kind of one thing that she did that deserves wider recognition. But she decided to do an album of Fats Waller's music. And as she explained it to me, Dick Hyman had suggested this to her, that she listened to the records that Fats Waller did in the 20s,
Uh-huh.
and to do through composed lyrics to not only the songs, but the improvisations, with
Yeah.
scat, everything. He thought that was a great idea. And so she had embarked on this and had done quite a bit with him. And so anyway, the way it starts is I'm at the piano and the phone rings and I answer the phone, but I'm really preoccupied. And Mike, it's Lorraine Feather. Oh, hi, how you doing? What's going on? She said, well, I'm calling you because Don Grusin said you can do anything. So I'm busy, so I'm not even reacting. And I said, okay, what's up? And she said, well, I'm doing this project with Fats Waller's music, and I'm doing a bunch of things with Dick Hyman. I thought it'd be fun to do a few songs with you. And I said, okay, let's get together. And so I get out my book and I write down a date, and that's it. I hang up. And I said, great. So I hang up. And then at some point, I go downstairs where I have all this music. I have a tremendous collection of sheet music, and I'm really very aware of all of the stride pianists, and have played through their stuff. But I hadn't really thought about, what was going to be in front of me. And so then I bring up this music and I started looking at these transcriptions, and it's stride piano and it's fast, and he had kind of large hands. He could play tenths and move around. And I just thought, what's going to happen? I'm going to spend hours getting these performances together, and we're going to do this, and it'll be a replication rather than an original idea. And the record's going to come out and it'll say studio pianist did a very, okay performance of Fats Waller, but we'd rather hear him, or so. That was the kind of thing I thought. And I thought, unlike me, Dick Hyman is a scholar in his piano playing, and he excels and has done a lot of recording of James B. Johnson. And he did all of Scott Joplin, and his whole thing is so different from mine. And then I started thinking, I don't want to spend hours to have that result. I said, so then I started thinking, well, is there another solution? And I thought, well, she's writing original lyrics, and she's now here today. So I think the music could be very honest in its relationship to Fats Waller and what he was about and his heritage, but that it could be my version of it, whatever that is. And then I started thinking about what I wanted to do, and I started playing music, the piano, and I got a really good idea. And so I called her back and I said, Lorraine, I just want to give you a heads up. And I told her the whole thing. I said, maybe you want to get somebody else. I said, but I want to play this music as if it's being recorded today, with the sensibility of today, but I want it to be true to what you're doing and you're singing and the timbre of your voice, or whatever I thought of, and I said, so does that ring a bell, or should you fire me? She said, no, it rings a bell, or whatever the words were. And so we got together, and she said, well, do you have any ideas about a band? I said, yeah, I want it to be really contemporary. And so she said, who do you have in mind? And I said, well, Cherry Lynn Carrington was living out here at the time, and I was such a fan of hers. And what I love about her is she plays with a lot of power. She's not just going to she's going to get the muscle of the music. And Dave Carpenter, who was living here, is sadly gone. And I said, that's really what I want to do. So, so I wrote these arrangements out, and I was so paranoid about the whole thing. I wrote every note of the piano part out just in case. And we went to Mad Hatter and we recorded the music, and Terry Harrington came in and he played a baritone part that I wanted in a solo section. And so we did the music, and it came out really well. I was very proud of it, and I think she liked it, and the record came out. And then she called me a few more times, and we did some other things after that. But she is so great. I have nothing but fond memories of doing it.
She's a great musician.
Yeah.
She really is. Um, that reminds me, remember I have two copies of your record from Japan from years ago.
My record from Japan.
Yeah, actually, they're CDs. Yeah, is it called Dreamsville or?
Well, I
Uh,
did a Mancini record here
yeah,
called Days of Wine and Roses.
I think that was it. And but the copies I have are both. I think they're both from Japan. One is kind of a weird shape that doesn't fit in with all the other CDs. But did you record a lot on under your own name?
No, that was the one CD that I did with Robert Townsend, who was, the head A&R producer of Perez Saraband. And he called me and asked me to do an album of Henry Mann CDs, and that's how that came about. And I'm sure it was issued in Japan, probably on JVC or something like that. But I don't know anything about a weird, whatever that was that you're
Okay,
talking
well, that's just because I just happened to get that Japanese copy.
about. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay, well, now can we move into your studio life?
Yeah, there's several things that are probably both things that were fun and fun to tell, and things that were really useful. Um, Lala Schifrin was the primary reason that I had an opportunity to work. Uh, I had been studying piano kind of informally with Pearl Kaufman, who was a major pianist in Los Angeles. She's a major classical pianist, and she was a first call film musician to be a legit pianist in an orchestra. She worked with Lalo, and she worked with Bernard Herrmann, and she worked with, uh, Alfred Newman, all of these amazing people. Um, and she brought me to my first Lalo Schifrin session. She was doing a 2-hour movie with him, and it was amazing. A 2-hour movie for television, what I wanted to say. It was like a double session. It was, a medium-sized orchestra, and I'll never forget, in the middle of a chase cue, everybody stopped playing, and it was just Pearl, and she was playing this music. It was like Bartok. I mean, it was such extraordinarily complex music for a musician to come in and play under those circumstances, and she just played it perfectly. And so at least I had a chance to see what the whole environment was like. It was so useful to me. And so when I met Lalo, he was asking me questions about, what I wanted to do and all that. And at the same time, he was doing a project with Paul Horn, and Paul Horn was looking for a pianist to play in his jazz quintet. So one thing led to another. I became the pianist in the Paul Horn quintet, and I thought the first gig I would get would be at Shelly's Manhole. The first gig I got was a contractor named Bobby Helfer, who was the most prominent film contractor in Hollywood at the time, who was Lalo's contractor, called me because Lalo had been commissioned by Paul Horn to write a full-length classical mass, but in a jazz style. It was called Jazz Suite on the Mass Texts. And so it was Paul's quintet and a medium-sized orchestra of woodwinds and brass and percussion, and 4 solo singers and a choir. So it was a big deal. And Paul had just signed a record deal with RCA, and Al Schmidt was his engineer and producer. And that was the very first recording session I ever did.
Oh my
And
God.
2 Grammys. So
Oh,
how to start at the top.
hey,
I mean,
wait,
it's
how
just,
old were you?
it was amazing.
How old?
And I'm telling this is part of a 2-part
Mike,
story. Uh,
Mike. Oh,
you're up, Cathy. Am I locked up? Can I be
no.
heard?
But
You're,
yeah, you can be heard. But I wanted to know how old you were.
how old I was? I would have been 24 or 5, probably
Okay.
25.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it was a lot of considerable stuff to do, and I did it well. And Lalo called me after the session, and he says, Mike, he says, I just want to tell you, he says, you're brilliant and you did a great job. He says, but we can't aim for perfection. There are budgetary reasons, and you can't ask every other thing a question. You have to figure some things out for yourself. That he always was a mentor to me in that way. I mean, he really educated me in a nice, way, and I'll never forget his kindness. So the second part of that has to do with being a diverse musician and how that was in my autobiography, which was I was working with Nino Tempo and April Stevens, who were brother and sister, who had a recording career with Atlantic Records, doing what I would call is blue-eyed soul before that term even existed. So they were doing music that was kind of black-rooted music, but and they sang, and they had a big hit record on Deep Purple done as a shuffle, almost like Louis Prima, but blacker. And so we were playing at a place called Slate Brothers, which was a restaurant on La Cienega. And they had all these different people who were just starting to come up, like Jack Jones and Don Rickles, and they were there. And so I learned so much with that kind of thing. And there's stories about that, which I won't go into right now. But Nino was very good friends with Phil Spector. And Nino liked my playing. And Nino was a wonderful tenor player, great Stan Getz-oriented tenor player. So that was part of what was happening with our working there. And he said to me, he says, you know, I have this friend of mine, he's a rock and roll producer. And he said, I'd like to recommend you to maybe do a recording with him. And I said, who's that? He said, Phil Spector. And I said, never heard of him, because I didn't know that music at all. You know, I had R&B roots, but I didn't have those, you know, wall of sound roots, if you will. So eventually I get a call, and I go to Gold, and it's my second recording session, and I go to Gold Star, and it's all of these classic people, and there's 3 keyboard players. I think Don Randy was there, and Michelle Rubini, and Hal Blaine, and Earl Palmer, and you know, all these people that are legendary people, and I don't have any idea what this music is about. You know, it's all triads, of course, that's okay. Saving grace was that all 3 keyboard players were playing the same thing. So basically, I watched what they're playing, and they were going like this, da, 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 trying to get my hands into the thing so you can see the rhythm. And I thought, okay, I can do that. And I just had to make a pact with myself not to play too far ahead of the beat, because this is rock and roll, and this is, you know, a different discipline at the time. So anyway, so I did what I did, and I had no idea if I'd ever see them again. And I got another call, and I showed up. So I think I was on a 3rd call doing Phil, and I noticed when we got to the fade, he had a live horn section. It was all live. It didn't add anything, I don't think. And so, you know, da, 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 maybe a different tempo, but okay. And the horns are, so you have like 2 bars where the horns are playing, and then there's 2 bars where they're not playing. So it's like 4, do da do da do da. Do that, and then 2 bars, nothing. So I thought, what would it be like if I don't do the da 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 da, and I take my hands up and play in octaves, maybe something, an answer, right? And I think of a lick, and I'll repeat the lick. And so I do this, and at the end of the thing, it's very quiet. And in the booth, Phil Spector says, "Which one of you piano players played that high shit on the end?" And I thought, okay, I have to fess up, right? I can't say it's somebody else. So I said, Phil, it was me. I was just, and he cut me off, and he said, it was fantastic. So I learned something, you know, I mean, learned something about pop records. I didn't really know that culture. And I started getting, you know, more calls, and I got to work with him a bunch. And that was the way the whole thing blossomed. And the other thing I would add about that is that in my situation, I would get known to certain people as a legit piano player and a person to call to play classically oriented piano parts. And in other calls I get, it was to be the other guy, the guy who was the jazz guy or the auxiliary guy or the whatever, but not the classical guy. And the thing that was kind of odd to me, but I understood it, was very often there would be 2 or 3 keyboard players on movies. Very often you'd have a pianist, you'd have an organist, you'd have a cellist player, a harpsichord, or any of that. So I go to one session, and the contractor would say, "You're the jazz guy." And it would almost be like, don't dare go over there, because you wouldn't know what you're doing, you know. And then I go to another day, and it would be the opposite. And what was so fortunate for me was that somehow it all eventually gelled together, and people started realizing that I had this kind of interest in and ability to do different things. And that kind of gave my development a shape and a focus, and it played into being able to work more, because I could do different things. And I felt like I was designed to do this job, you know, because I was interested in all these musics, and I love problem solving, and I love immediate reactions and doing something immediately. And I think that's one of the reasons I didn't become a composer. I didn't have the patience for it, you know. I mean, I've written quite a bit of things but it's secondary energy in my life.
Have you written just for yourself or written for other people? Or...
No, I've written, Harvey Mason and I did a lot of writing for very prominent artists. We started by working on a Bob James Earl Clue album. Harvey called me and we did that, and that was successful. And then we wrote a Lee Ritenour album, and then we did a Lee Ritenour Dave Grusin album. And then I submitted an tune that we had written to Tom Scott, and it was recorded. And some of them were sort of the singles on those records. They were primarily, a lot of them were GRP records, so they had airplay kind of things. And our tune would be the one that kind of was on the radio. So we did maybe a half a dozen of those. And I wrote music for a movie. It was a very small budgeted movie that probably was seen by 12 people, but I did the music for that. And I did 6 episodes of a TV show. It was all jazz. It was cool. It was called Grapevine. And the director, who went on to become a big director, he said that I heard it through the grapevine, Marvin Gaye, I believe. He wanted it to sound like it was done by the Oscar Peterson troupe. So, hey, I'm the guy. So it was great. It was a real racy kind of thing with a lot of dialogue, and he wanted all this fast, kind of medium to up-tempo jazz. Yeah.
Cool.
So there've been some fun things.
Wow. Um, there's a Netflix show on right now called The Eddy, which is about a Paris jazz club, and they have great playing in it. The people playing are actually acting, and really good playing.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, you might want to check that out.
I would love to see that.
Okay, well that's
So
again,
you want to know a studio story?
well, yeah, I do, but I just wanted to make a comment because I've just been I can't tell you how I've been enjoying interviewing people, and I feel like people say things in the interview, and I can feel the inside of my brain shifting. It's really affecting me in a really great way, but a very obvious way is that I love hearing, and I'm sure people are getting inspired by this. I love hearing that a person such as yourself, such as these stories, just you keep moving forward, you keep doing what you love, you do it as well as you can, you are adventurous in spirit, and it pays off. And you're in in motion, and people within this area notice you and bring you over to another area, and so on and so on. And it's just, I don't know, there's something so I don't know, it trips me out, makes me feel really good inside to think about that and to feel that. So
Let me
clapping. I'm clapping. I'm impressed. I mean, I've always been impressed with you, but now I'm impressed again. Let's see. See, Otmaro, he said the same thing. See, I can't help but having the utmost appreciation and respect for someone that has the same commitment to music as a much bigger experience beyond confining styles and labels. You're such an inspiration. I'm glad I've been able to tell you this personally.
Oh, not surprised. He lives on the same corner that I do.
Oh, that's a really nice way of putting it.
Oh,
Uh,
really great. And his wife.
oh,
Beautiful.
and his wife, yeah. Liz Finch, actually. Hi, Liz. She said Randy Kerber is the pianist on the Eddie. I don't know.
Right. I was just thinking that when you put it together, because I know he's been living in Paris, and I know, if I'm not mistaken, he's writing music for the show and also part of the band. And I think he may be an actor in it as well.
Well,
But I
I think
haven't seen it.
the
Haven't
whole
seen it.
band was acting, actually. And he's a great piano player. I've only seen one part of the series, one show, but it's really good.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Forward to that.
he is a great pianist. Um, I would like to know another session story, like a funny, maybe one of your, you know, a funny. I'm sure you had just great sessions, horrible sessions, funny sessions. You know.
Yeah. Which category are we going for?
How about a really strange, funny one?
Strange, funny one?
Yeah.
Okay. Jerry Goldsmith is one of my very favorite people to have intersected with in my whole life. I did 250 movies with him, which is, I got this list together because someone said, how many did you do? And I said, I don't know. And then I thought, well, I'll check it out, you know, and I was amazed because, I mean, at the time, very often he'd have to go to Europe to work, and for that many movies to have elapsed that I was blessed to be on. But it was the personal relationship that I had with him. I'll start by saying that if Jerry liked you, he liked to mess with you. And I guess I was fortunate or whatever enough to be on that page. Um, so Jerry was very technology oriented. He was one of the first composers to really become literate with synthesizers and the sounds. And so on most movies, I would play piano and synths. If there was another keyboard player, it was always Ralph Garrison when he was available, and he played synths. So there was a lot of synthesizer stuff going on. But unlike almost any other composer, Jerry had cartridges and he had everything specifically, the sounds were already decided. Because on most gigs, we would be like synthesized orchestrators. We would come in and it would say, you know, low undulating sound, the curse of death, and you'd have to figure out what that sound was and do it. With Jerry, it was not that. So I got a call, it was the only time to go to his house when he was in pre-production sending demos to the director. And it was an amazing movie called The Russia House, which had, I think it's the only picture of Jerry's that I can recall that had a real jazz component, not movie jazz, but jazz. And through his agent, Richard Kraft, he was connected with Branford Marsalis, who was a wonderful tenor player. It was brother of Wynton Marsalis. And so he was hired to play soprano sax on this. And then there was a bass player. Well, I'll get to that part. So anyway, I get to his house, and what he wants is, at that time, he was thinking soprano sax and a DX7 kind of Rhodes sound and a bass sound. And so he said to me, he says, so Mike, he said, I hear you really have a cool Fender Rhodes DX7 sound. He said, that's what I want. And I said, well, Jerry, I said, I don't have my gear here. I don't have my sounds here. I said, do you have two DX7s, mono DX7s? And he said, yeah. I said, okay, well, what I usually do is I take two of them and I pan them kind of 45-degree angles, and I'll get two sounds that interact with each other to cause some kind of thing to happen. And sometimes I'll add chorusing or reverb after the fact. But if I can get the two DX7s and you have a library of electronic piano sounds, I think I'll give you something, and then you can tell me how to make it better. So pretty quickly, I was able to get something that I thought was a starting point. And I said, well, how's this, Jerry? And he put his hands on his hips and he looks at me, he says, I hate you. So I'm used to that. So I said, well, I can accept that, but I said, how's the sound? And he said, the sound's great. And I said, well, then why do you hate me? He said, because I didn't create the sound, you did. I said, you asked me to. He says, that doesn't change anything. I still hate you. And I said, well, if it's of any, you know, if it's of any use to you, I can live with the hate. And if you want to say that you created the sound, I could live with that too. And so anyway, so that was the end of that, but it was fun. And then I did a bass part, and I elected to do a fretless electric bass. He seemed to be what he wanted. And then when we did the soprano sax, I mean, there were no samples in those days. And so I used a DX7 soprano sax, and I used the pitch bend wheel and the mod wheel to give it personality and make it sound like it was an individual with an attitude or whatever. All right, so that's the end of that. And he thanked me, go home. So now I go, and we have several days at MGM Studios with a big orchestra, and Branford is there, and I had recommended John Patitucci to play. And it had changed in the sense that I was now playing piano and John was playing upright bass. So we run the first main title down, and it's a big elaborate piece. And there's this huge section with the love theme, which is basically soprano and the three of us. And so all of that. And then typically he always wanted me to be in the booth as somebody that he could talk to about whatever. So I'm in there, and I wasn't that close to him, and he yells, Mike, come here. You know, kind of whatever, a little naked. And so I went up to him and I said, Jerry, yeah, what is it? He said, Branford. I said, yes, Branford. He says, I hate the way he's playing. And there was nothing to hate. He was playing beautifully. And I said, well, what do you hate about it? It seems okay to me. He said, he's just playing what I wrote. He's not doing anything with it. He said, you did so much better at my studio. And I said, well, he's probably just thinking it's a movie and it's a theme and it should be fairly straightforward. Just tell him to loosen it up. It's not a problem. He can do anything you want. It's going to sound great. He said, you tell him. And I'm like, wait a minute. And I said, well, I just met him. I don't know him. And he said, I just met him too. And I said, yes, but Jerry, I'm working for you. You hired him. And I said, it would be inappropriate for me to tell him, even on your behalf, for me to tell him that. I don't really think I should do that. He didn't say anything. So now we walk out of the booth and, the big door going to the recording room, and he has his arm around me. And we're walking toward the podium, and Branford was set up close to where we were to all be together. And he yells over the whole orchestra, hey, Branford, Mike's coming back there. He has something to tell you. That's the story. And I, in the nicest way, I told him it was fine. But it was just,
and how did that go? Did it go well? How did that go?
It went great. I mean, and I'm very proud of the way that whole score went. And another thing that happened that was very interesting was the director loved jazz. So Jerry decided that the end title would end up with a lot of jazz. And when the film was over, we were just playing. And I just it felt so good. So I didn't let it die. I just kept comping. And we kept playing for another minute and a half or something. And it really was sounded great. And the way that turned out was that the director loved this music so much, he actually did a visual reprise that, he like double printed the video stuff to be as long as the music. And that's what happened at the end time.
Oh, wow.
So if anybody looks up the Russia House, I think it's one of Jerry's most magnificent scores. And I was very proud to be a part of it. And everybody sounds great on it. So if it's around.
I kind of remember.
And it's a wonderful movie. It's a really good movie.
Yeah, yeah. Were you into Cinema Paradiso when it came out, or the music and?
So what about Cinema Paradiso?
Cinema Paradiso. Were you into that movie when it came out, and the music, and are you into him, the composer?
The composer of Cinema Paradiso was Ennio Morricone, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
And which is there a question?
Yeah, I was just asking if you. Sorry, it just passed my mind for some reason. If you were into his music, his writing.
I love his music. I did a beautiful recording of that with Monica Mancini.
See, now why? See, I was picking it up.
It was one of the things I really loved doing with her. Greg Field produced it, and it was a beautiful, beautiful record. I think we also did it live, I think, with Jack Elliott.
Oh.
Or maybe with Hank. No, it wasn't with Hank, but probably with the Henry Mancini Orchestra, we did a live version of it.
Nice.
In fact, I'm remembering it because it was part of a medley, and somehow the piano was featured a lot. And I was introduced, my name was introduced by Julie Andrews.
Oh.
So I remember.
Yeah.
And Blake Edwards was there. It was cool.
Cool. Yeah, that music is really beautiful. The first time I saw that movie, I was in Japan, and I was waiting, or no, I guess I was just in Japan in my hotel room, and there was no English in the movie because it was in Italian and the subtitles were Japanese. So I totally got the story and the music with not really having these words come into me. I was just weeping through the whole thing.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most inspired melodies. It's just so haunting, and it goes on in this incredibly addictive way.
Yeah, totally. Let's see. What else shall we talk about? Oh, I wanted to know, do you still, obviously, I'm saying obviously because I just don't believe there's as much studio work probably now as there used to be. But are you still working a bit, quite a bit, or?
Well, right now, not at all because of the virus. Um, not working all that much. I mean, there's several answers to that. One is there's so much less work in Los Angeles than there used to be.
Yeah,
It's really become an international marketplace to record, and we're not financially competitive with many other resources. You know, and you can do remote recordings so easily. Um, Also, another element of that is that a lot of times, very often, composers are not recording full orchestras. They're recording parts of orchestras like brass and strings and sometimes woodwinds and ethnic percussion or something, or soloists. So the piano, when the piano is a neutral element in the score, even as a solo instrument, when it's not supposed to sound like anybody you know who it is, but it's just a really beautiful rendering, kind of a neutral rendering of what's written that is not supposed to take you out of the film, they can do it with samples and it sounds great. And so that's another component of it.
yeah,
So yeah, so my life is rebalancing and
yeah,
different.
yeah. Morrow has a silly question. Let's see. When you participate on a movie soundtrack in which the piano is prevalent, are you ever asked to participate in the final mix and treatment of the track?
The final mix,
Yeah.
not really, because I'm not there when the music is being mixed. I mean, I have been a guest sometime and attended a mix of the music, but keep in mind when you're talking about mix for a movie, the mix of the music is just sort of an early link. At the end of the day, you're mixing music that has already been mixed. I'm going to change that in a minute, but in the old days, I'll say music was in a final mix, and then sound effects and dialogue. Nowadays, uh, everything can show up in a way where you can control everything. And that's one of the reasons they're recording orchestras in sections, because directors want to have control. So it's no longer, the composer has no control in the sense that this is the orchestration and it's mixed and the balances are all the way I wrote it to be symphonically. It's not that anymore. It's now, oh, you don't want the brass? Okay, we'll dump the brass. Okay, you want to, and they can take, not only that, but you don't want to use the music here, you're going to use it over here. All of that is part of the landscape now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a composer can write music and it could be replaced by a song. There could be a song and they throw it out and replace it with score. They might, after the score is done, ask somebody else to write some additional music, or they might license something.
Anything goes.
Anything you can imagine is possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the answer is no, I'm not a part of that.
Yeah. He said piano sounds are the star in some scores, and I always wondered if there's a courtesy to involve the artist in the process.
I mean, basically, that becomes counterproductive in the sense that if you have the artist there, they're probably going to want to hear more of themselves for them, and that has nothing to do with the objective, which is to make the music mixed appropriately for the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I appreciate you being in my ballpark, rooting for the piano. We like
Yeah, Catherine Bostick is a friend of mine. She also came on. She was a guest, but she's told me about so last year she wrote the music to the Toni Morrison documentary, which
right.
was wonderful, and she also wrote the end song credit and sang it. But she said that was one of the first times, I think she said, where they called her up and they said, "You write the music, whatever."
That's fabulous. She's
Yeah.
a big talent. I love Catherine personally and musically. She's fantastic.
Yeah, she's a really special person.
Yeah, and
But
she's really getting the opportunities that she deserves. It's her
yeah,
career is opening up in a great way.
myself and Dan Davila are co-producing her a record on her. It's her second record.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, she's
Fabulous.
a great writer. Like, her music is kind of Americana, and it's really beautiful. Her singing is, she has a great tone, and she plays piano really beautifully.
Yeah, she's wonderful. I hope we get to collaborate on something someday before we leave the planet.
Hey, Ralph Humphrey. He said, "Rural still life is my first acquaintance with you and the other fabulous musicians."
Oh my God. Well, there's a story about that. So we have a story.
Okay,
Uh,
cool.
Tom Scott, God, he must have been in his teens when he called me to first work with him. And we did some gigs. And then he had been recording in Roger Kellaway's quartet. And he got signed by Bob Field to be an artist on Impulse, which was a big deal for Tom at the time. And he had done one initial record, which was kind of a pop record with a large ensemble. I think Ian Freeburn Smith may have done the arrangements for that. And then he was going to do a second record, which was a quartet record. And he basically wanted to use the same kind of thing that Roger had. But I think he didn't want to have exactly the same personnel so that it could be, identified with him. Because everybody else in the band was part of Roger's band, Chuck DeMonico and John Guerin. And so he called me to be a part of that. And he invited me to write a tune. So I wrote this funky tune in 7/4, and I called it Rural Still Life number 26. And I did it as a joke because painters do an enormous amount of still lifes. It's like it's still life number 38, whatever. So there weren't the preceding 25s. There was just the one number 26. So, and it was a kind of zany thing. I think Tom did some kind of sound altering thing on his tenor, and I used a clavinet with a wah-wah pedal, and it was pretty funky, and pretty street, raw, in a
Yeah,
cool way.
yeah.
So anyway, they decided they were going to call the album Rural Still Life, and they decided that they should shoot artwork at a place that reflected that. So we went to this place all the way out in the West Valley, which, and I may not have the name right, but I think it was Johnny Spleen or Johnny Splawn. He had a ranch that was rented out to movie studios when they needed something for like Western movies to shoot. And that's where we did the photography for the album.
Ah,
And that location later became the Charles Manson
oh,
ranch.
wow.
So that was a really kind of odd, like little coda to that story.
Wow.
But I really thought Tom did a great job with that album, and there's so many wonderful things on it. He wrote a song called Song Number One, where he multi-tracked himself playing a lot of different woodwinds, and it was almost impressionistic. It was just really, really beautiful, very compositional. And he wrote a tune called With Respect to Coltrane, which was the tune that had that kind of feel that Coltrane's rhythm section had, kind of a loping thing, almost like Elvin playing the drums kind of thing. And there was a ballad we played, Body and Soul. And there's other things, but I remember that album. Really, it's one of the albums I'm most happy with being a part of.
Nice.
Tom is amazing. Very, very special musician.
Yeah. I feel like I don't know why this came into my mind. I feel like I saw you at the Ornette Coleman concert in Hollywood with two bands. Would you have gone to that?
I would have gone to it. I don't know if I did go to it. I love so much of Ornette Coleman. One thing I'll say, just a complete like aside, but when I was going to high school, a prep school in New Jersey, it was 1957 to 1959. And every weekend that I could get to New York City, it was about an hour away. I was there. And I heard almost every great band you can imagine who was active in those years. You can label the bands. I mean, and one of the bands was when Ornette left LA and went to New York with Don Cherry and Billy Higgins and Charlie Hayden. I heard that band at the 5 spot. I heard
Wow.
Clifford Brown, Max Roach. I heard John Coltrane when he left Miles, and he had his first band, which was before the band with McCoy Tyner and Steve Kuhn played. Um, I heard Count Basie with Joe Williams. I heard Miles's bands. I heard Bill Evans with Scott LaFaro, Paul Motion at Vanguard.
Wow.
And just unbelievable experiences and opportunities in that regard.
Man. You guys go out. I see you around going out and to hear music. Well, do you what do you think of the scene that's happening now? How the music is developing, with the younger people coming up, and like the Blue Whale type of crowd, you know.
Mhm.
What do you think of that music? Do you like it?
Well, I think of it as a lot of different people doing individual things. So uh, I like the whole idea of it. I love the Blue Whale. And every time I go down there to see someone, I usually know something about or know someone. So I always have a good experience there. And then what's the place on the west side near the airport? I always say the name wrong.
Sam First.
What is it?
Sam First.
Right, Sam First. I always call it Steve First or Joe First. I never get it right. But anyway, went down there to hear Danny Janklow and Larry Goldings once, was great.
Oh, yeah.
And there's so many wonderful musicians that are coming up. So I love so much of what it is. I mean, and what I love is that everybody it's no longer a school of everybody's kind of doing the same thing. It's like you could kind of do anything you want to do, and there's so many wonderful people. Dan Rosenboom, I think he's amazing. Uh, a lot of wonderful talents.
Yeah. Um, I was going to ask you who were a few. I mean, listing favorite people is kind of silly, but like three or four people that come to mind that are that are that are playing now, especially in LA. Any particular?
I haven't been, most of my music life is not that. So I don't really feel like I'm knowledgeable enough to say people
Yeah.
that are important things to interject.
Who are you just enjoying listening to lately? Are are you listening?
Recently, I found myself revisiting Keith Jarrett records and videos in particular. Um, what else have I been listening to? I listen to a lot of classical music. Um, I have a great love for New Orleans R&B music, starting with Professor Longhair and going through James Booker and Dr. John, and I have a very I feel spiritually related to that music in a lot of ways. So I like that. Um, I like listening to Ellington right now, Charlie Parker. Um, I love all of the, I shouldn't say all, I love so much of what Miles Davis did and what Coltrane did. And Herbie Hancock, major fan of Herbie Hancock, and Wayne Shorter.
Yeah.
I got to work with Wayne Shorter on a James Newton Howard score. It was great. It was really fun.
Wow, that must have been nice. Um, I have from my friend Andrew Schermerhorn. Did you work much with Jeff Porcaro or Steve Gadd?
I've never worked with Steve Gadd, but I'll tell you a funny story. All my friends work in Steve Gadd's band, and James Taylor, all those guys, and so I go very often to hear him. And so at one point, who was it? Walt Fowler, I think, introduced me to Steve Gadd. He said, "Oh, you got to hear Mike Lang. He's great." And Steve looks at me and says, "Want to play sometime?" And I just love that. It was just so open, and and it's yeah, sure. And Jeff Porcaro, I did work with quite a bit.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but one album that I really remember very well is it was a Stan Getz album. Herb Alpert had signed Stan to start being with an A&M artist, and they had recorded, and I had been working with Herb on a lot of stuff and actually writing with him. You asked me about writing. Herb and I co-wrote a tune, and Herb and I and Eddie Delbarrio and Shorty Rogers wrote a tune. I had done this record called Rise with Herb Alpert, which was a big hit, and so he was kind of asking me to do this and that. And I loved everything. I'll never forget. I was sitting at home, and I get this phone call, and I answer the phone. I said, "Hello, Mike, it's Herb." I said, "Yeah, what's going on?" He said, "Well, Eddie Delbarrio and Shorty Rogers and I, we're in the studio at A&M, and we're writing a tune. We thought you might like to be a part of it." That's Herb Alpert. I mean, just the way, his generosity and his openness. So he signed Stan, and they recorded an album with his rhythm section with Kenny Barron. And Herb decided he didn't want to release it because he had done so many albums like that. So he decided he wanted to do some kind of a concept album to really present Stan, and he got this idea to do Brazilian music. And Eddie Delbarrio was very heavily involved writing a lot of material with Herb. And so Herb called me one day and he says, we have this date coming up. And he said, and the band was really great. Kenny Barron played piano. I played Rhodes, real Rhodes, and Eddie Delbarrio played synths. And the rhythm section was Oscar Castroneves. Paulina DaCosta, Jeff Caro, and Jimmy Johnson. I mean, just, and a great kind of combination of people, you know.
Yeah.
And so asked me to write a tune. So I had this idea that I wanted to write something that was really melodic because I think of Stan as a melody person.
Yeah.
But I wanted to find some kind of a template in my head that would make it more contemporary. So I thought, Gato Barbieri, you know, he's Latin, he's a great melodist, there's a different intensity. So I tried to let that project the framework for what harmony and whatever I was going to do. And I wrote this tune, and I was way too excited about it, you know. And so I sent it to Herb, and I was waiting for him to call and say, yeah, that's it, that's it. He called back, he said, Mike, he said, it's a great tune, it's not for us, just like that. And I'm like, okay, what's next? He said, well, let me tell you what we're looking for. I said, okay. He said, do you remember an album that Stan did with Eddie Sauter called Focus? And it's an album that I know and I love. It's a symphonic album. And Eddie Sauter wrote these beautiful, extended, almost like classical compositions. And Stan came in, there was nothing written for him, and he just improvised against what he heard. But I couldn't imagine that in the context of a rhythm section. It didn't make any sense, but I didn't say anything. And I said, yeah, I'm familiar with the album. He says, and do you know an album by Miles Davis called Bitches Brew? And I thought, okay, this doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, I can't see Stan in that environment. And I knew the album really well. And I thought, and all I said is, yes. And he said, well, what happens when you put those two things together? And I said, I don't know, let me see. And I hung up the phone and I said, you know, I said, I don't want to do this. So I had all of my synths at home, and I have a drum machine that I know nothing about. So, and I realized when I was done, I wanted to write this thing that I hated because I hated the whole idea. So, but I had to come up with something. So, you know, I went to preset number 1 on the drums and it's going doom, doom, doom. I said, okay, that's good. So, and then I had this sound on my synths that was sort of like a piano Rhodes synth pad sound. So I could hear chords, you know. So I started just playing chords because he wanted no melody, just a pad. And the harmonies that I was coming up with they couldn't be like Bitches Brew, but it was a little more toned down, like maybe Joe Zawinul with Weather Report on something lyric. That's about as far as I could go with that. And then I got a bass part and I put it on and I sent it in and I figured, okay, that's it. He's going to hate it, and that's good. So he called me back and he said, you did exactly what I asked you to, but it's wrong. So I said, okay, how about this? I said, how about if I just write something from my heart and we don't talk about it? And he said, who could say no to that? So I improvised a tune that eventually became something called Lonely Lady. And it was the most complicated song I ever wrote harmonically. And it had 7 4 bars, and it all came with an improvisation. And it's on the album. I'm really happy. So anyway.
Wow. Okay, now which album is that? I want to write that down.
It's called Appassionato. APASI. Hang on. I can give you the real answer. And the rest of the album is all stuff that Eddie Del Barrio, who's one of my favorite musicians in life, and Herb worked together on.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And the name of your song was?
It's called Lonely Lady. And then it has another life on a new album that I worked on with a wonderful singer named Patrice Jigou. And the lyric, it was retitled Remembrances, which is actually the title that I wanted in the first place.
Oh.
So hang on, I'm doing this all wrong, but I will get it right.
Gosh, I remember recently hearing that. I'm sure, I don't think that was the singer, but I remember seeing on YouTube or something, you were playing with a really great singer.
Well, there's a whole lot of stuff on YouTube and Facebook about Patrice's record. It was 3 years in the making of recording with various arrangers and producers and so forth.
Was she the one that you were playing in the studio with? And she's really a great singer.
I'm sorry, hang on one second. Appassionato is APASIONADO.
Okay.
Now, how do I get back to, I've lost the video on the Zoom thing. How do I get it back?
It's a page. It's on a page behind there, honey.
Huh?
It's on a page behind it. Move it around.
I will. Okay, hang on. Well, if I click on the Zoom, or I'm gonna, it says sign in. Well, no, I can't do that. Deborah,
It's
hang
not
on.
behind?
Deborah's gonna help me. Hang on.
No, no.
Um,
Oh, good. I hope I'm not visible.
You're not visible yet.
You are, it's
What
okay.
do I do?
Let's see. Let's see. It shouldn't it be really on behind here? I'm just saying move this.
Oh, we can move it. We can just
move that
we
whole
can just
thing.
close it and close this.
Yeah, but I mean move it so because it might
Close
just be
this.
right behind here, but it might be.
I don't think so, but oh wait.
Just move it down. Honey.
Whoops, what's this? Oh my God. I'm just closing everything.
You don't
Save.
have to do that. Just see if it's behind there. No. Okay. So now go into here. Or
Here?
just click the link again.
This sounds like me and my husband.
And just click the link again.
What link?
We'll go back to the original link that got you
oh,
on.
okay, then I have to go to,
Go to your email.
all right, I'm sorry, guys.
That's
Yeah,
all right. You're
this is-
still here, so
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
And if I'm your tech guy, this is really funny.
okay, so, wait, no, this is in here, and Cathy Segal,
I'm
here.
like,
never
All right, here it
girl.
there
is.
you go. Now
All
click on the enter and it should bring you back in.
Whatever that was. Where's the link? It's down here. Okay, here it
There
is.
you go. Okay. You should have them again.
Well, I hope so. Okay, allow.
Yeah. Just sign in.
I don't think
Do you have to let him in, Cathy, or is there something?
Well,
that
looks like you're here,
oh, well, it's trying to sign in.
and I can let you in that way too. But you are still here.
Oh,
I'm
you're
running
already
Zoom.
in.
Yeah, we never let you go. But I would push. Is there a video?
Well, you know, I mean,
There's no
worst case
screen.
scenario,
Here's some
I
videos
can
of
do
video
this
I
without
found on
seeing
the web.
myself.
Take a look.
Well,
I mean, I can hear you, and so,
okay,
Well-
we're almost finished with the whole thing too.
oh, okay,
I mean, we can see you.
good.
So yeah.
Oh,
So
you can see it. Oh, then you can see me. Oh dear, I'm sorry.
that's all right.
Okay.
Remember Pearl, ladies and
Yeah,
gentlemen.
please. Hello.
So it's actually coming to the end of the whole thing anyway. But I did want to. There was a question, one more question that, and Tim Weston said you're fired. Let's see. And Larry Goldman said just hit the Command tab, and you'll see Zoom. Anyway, Larry Goldman wants to know, I don't know how he knows this, but how about Mike's recent discovery of the late Bernard Pfeiffer, French Ed Pat, who spent his later years in Philly?
Bernard Pivot was a French jazz pianist, and actually, I knew of him years ago, but had forgotten about him. In fact, I don't know if I still have them. I had some LPs of his, and I can't remember who made me aware of him currently, but there's a record that he did, I think it was assembled by his family or something, of these just amazing tracks that he played. And my Facebook page is full of stuff, so you probably have to scroll forever to find it. But he's just an amazing pianist, and he did things that were so original. And it's sad that he didn't have the kind of exposure that someone of his originality and depth should have had.
Oh.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. That's where Larry's from. Do you know Larry Golden? You
I
might
know
have.
Larry very well. Yeah, Larry's great.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So anyway, that's cool. Well, I want to thank you, Michael.
Oh,
I love you so much. You're such a, such a dear, sweet, wonderful person, and you're obviously a quality person.
Wow.
And, well, it's true. I'm not the only one who thinks so.
Well, I just want to thank you, Cathy. I watched the interview you did with Nan Schwartz, which was really great. And for those who don't know, Cathy has all these things archived so they can be watched after the broadcast. And I think that's a really good one. And you're so great to the community, everything you do to help other singers, help musicians and so forth. And you have an amazing life. And I want to thank everybody who tuned in to suffer through this. Thank you so much.
I don't think anyone suffered actually, so we're okay. I didn't see any pain little, faces going by or anything like that.
Cool. Great.
And I do want to tell you guys that tomorrow I have a day off. It's always Thursday. And Friday is the really wonderful jazz singer Kate Reed, who lives in Florida. And Saturday, I have two people on together, the wonderful pianist Karen Hammock and a great singer, guitarist, songwriter who's a lot like Bonnie Raitt, Jody Segal.
Mm.
And the two of them have worked together a lot. And then ending with Sunday, Alexia Vasiliou, who is from Cyprus. Literally, she's there in Cyprus. She's a community builder, and she's been an actress and a singer and composer. She's really she's an activist, I have to say, and she's pretty astounding as a person. And next week we'll have Joe LaBarbera and Ted Falcon and Shelley Berg and Bruce Foreman. So.
Oh, you're back, by the way. I see you. Great.
Oh, good. And Greg Karukas, Nancy King. That would be great, except Nancy King is a hermit. So I seriously doubt that I can even fully reach her. But it's a great idea. I'd love to have Nancy King on. But anyway, I did have Sheila Jordan and Jay Clayton last week. So that was along the similar tribe, Okay, Mike Lang, I love you.
Love you too, Kathy. Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye, Deborah.
Bye, bye. Great show. Great show.
Okay, I guess the thing to say is I'm leaving the building, so to speak.
I'm sorry I dressed for the occasion.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.